Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Mental Health Awareness Month. We're closing out Mental Health Awareness Month with a 12-hour live stream. I'll be here all day today talking all things mental health um, as we close out Mental Health Awareness Month. If this is your first time coming onto our channel, my name is Joanna Daniel. I'm a trauma-informed counselor and I live in the UK. So I'll be here all day today. And, it's 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. So I'll be here. So share the channel, share it with your friends, share it with your relatives, share it with your work, your church, share it just with everybody who will be here. As I go throughout the day, I'm going to invite you to go to our website at woundsthescars.com to learn some more about us and some of the services that we offer at Wounds the Scars. We do retreats, courses, one-to-one counseling, have connections with affiliate counselors. We do referrals and all things giving you support around your mental health. I was particularly interested in Mental Health Awareness Month this year. Not that I'm not always interested in Mental Health Awareness Month, but this year the focus was on anxiety. And I wanted to just do this to close it out because sometimes after Mental Health Awareness Month is done, the conversation can end and we can all move on with our lives, we think. But mental health is here, it's here to stay, unfortunately. And so we need to learn some of the things, how to manage it. So before I go any further, I just want to welcome everyone. I'm just going to share this just to let everybody know that we are live and invite them to come and join us. I also want to make sure and invite them. Okay, so we're sounding good. I'm just going to share, just let people know that we're here and that they should come. Please share the link as widely as you can as we do all things mental health today. I'm going to start with looking at some things around mental health in the news and and just what's happening. But I'm starting with a promise. I have a promise box on my counter in my kitchen, and every morning I made this promise box a couple weeks ago when I know young people were doing exams. My children are doing exams. Welcome, I can see that somebody's here. My children are doing exams, and I made this promise box because I know that exam time is an anxious time for people. And I wanted to provide some support to people. So the promise this morning that I chose is you will keep him in perfect peace whose mind those whose mind you will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you. And that's Isaiah 26 verse 3. So that's my promise today. I'm claiming peace today as I have this conversation around mental health throughout today. We're going to have breaks. We're going to have breaks between and much breaks, but we're going to have much breaks between between as we go throughout the day. But today we have our first conversation we're having in about 45 minutes is around Black men don't cry. So we're talking about Black men and mental health in the first conversation, and then we're talking to an amazing woman who is going to share her journey of helping her son supporting someone who has mental health, and she will share her story. So, I like to talk about my influence for mental health. I've always been interested in mental health. When I trained as a social worker, I I was interested in working in mental health. Things had changed by then, but as I trained as a counselor, I knew that this is the area that I wanted to work on. But sometimes there is a thing that starts us off, that we don't understand that thing that starts us off. And where when I was growing up, and still is, my uncle, my mother's only brother, has psychosis, and I grew up seeing that. Not We don't talk about it. He's looked after, but we don't talk about it. We don't talk about underlying causes or reasons or what. He's looked after. He takes his medication. He's on treatment. He's an old man now, but he suffered all of my life. And so that's a long time. And my mother can remember the day when things changed, when he was a young man, handsome, working, having a good job. And then one day everything changed. And I imagine everything changed for the family as well. So for families who are supporting people with mental health, there's a massive learning curve. There's a massive challenge. There is so much that is involved in supporting somebody with mental health. Um, and sometimes when we don't have correct information, we can do that in a way that is, it can cause, I'm going to say, a lot of shame on the family, a lot of shame, unspoken shame. Nobody talks about it. It can cause a lot of that. So I grew up seeing my uncle with psychosis. I grew up around mental health. I grew up around people who struggle with mental health. My grandmother to some degree on my father's side, but once again, we don't have conversation around mental health in the family and just the implications for people in the generation, leading on from the generation. Because one of the things we don't understand enough of is pathology, like something that's going to lead on from one thing to the next. I was talking to my children this week about pathology. They like sweet things, and I was saying to them, do you understand what pathology is? They come to all of my seminars and stuff, so they understand a little bit. And I said, this is my struggle. You know what happens to mommy when she has things with sugar and wheat, and you are my child and you have my DNA. And so if I have a challenge, I said, I am a mirror for you. If I have a challenge, then it's really important that you look at that mirror, see what mommy struggles with, and know that if I do the same things that she did, I might have the same challenges that she has. Do you want to have the challenges that I have? Because I don't want you to have the challenges that I have. So give them some understanding of themselves and how, generational things repeat. My son said, the one that knows everything, said, but mom, I also have my dad's DNA. I said, that's true. You do have your dad's DNA, but you also have mine. And it's really important for you to understand what that might mean for you and the lifestyle that you choose. Don't do the lifestyle that mommy did in her early years and in her 20s, because we are seeing the results of it now. So make different choices early. And sometimes mental health is like that. And, we don't want to acknowledge that when we have mental health in the family, it's something that everybody needs to be aware of. It's something that everybody needs to understand because of the implications for the next generation. And if we have if mental health is in the generations above us, then we need to go, oh, so what's the implication for me? What are the implications for me? What are the things that I need to be aware of? What are the things that I need to be careful of, so that I am not going to, my eye is, I have a slight eye problem, so I'm going to be doing this throughout the day, so that I can minimize this thing for myself. What are the implications, right? So as we go into our conversation, so you're having me on my own for the first hour of this mental health awareness month closeout. I'm here all day today from 9 a.m. until 9 p.m. And my children thinks I'm crazy because I'm an introvert and my limit for talking is like an hour and a half before I need to go restore. I'm going to take several breaks throughout the day, for just a morning break, lunch, and so on. But we will be back throughout the day. Right. So this morning, I want to talk about mental health in the news for this first hour. And when I was looking through the news around mental health, and there's several things that are going on: government initiatives, reviews, several things that are going on in mental health in the news this week and this month. And if you were reading the news, you would have seen several things. People are sharing their stories, and all that kind of good stuff is going on as mental health is now becoming more and more mainstream. And I'm really glad for that, because there's so much stereotypes around it, so much how we stereotype people who have any kind of mental health problem, how we shun them and avoid them. And as at Wounds to Scars, we speak mostly to people in the Christian community. In our community, mental health there's a lot of stigma around it and around implications or assumptions around someone's spirituality and mental health. So for this first segment, I'm talking about mental health in the news. But the story I want to focus on is mental health in children. And according to Sky News, it says that there's a rising number of children needing help for serious mental health problems, the NHS data shows. So for the NHS data, and for those who are not in the UK, the NHS is the National Health Service, and Sky News is saying that there's a rise in the number of children that needs mental health services. Now that is so important to me. That's important for one because I have children, and the challenges that comes with raising children in this world, in this generation, that is, everything is massively different. And one of the things that I know my husband and I have come to realize is that if we don't understand how to deal with the challenges and the struggles that they might face, then we're not going to be equipped to support them. And I'm not blaming parents in any way because I'm a parent, as I say. It's a massive thing to manage, to be able to manage, because we don't always have the resources to we don't always have the resources to be able to manage as we would like to, or the understanding. We don't always have the understanding to do it. And sometimes it can be, even as a parent, sometimes it can be, I'm a parent, I'm a counselor, I work with trauma, I work with mental health every day, but when you have to deal with anything that looks like that in your own personal life, that is very challenging, because now you need your own support system to be able to do it and to be able to do it effectively. So what's the data? So according to the NHS, data reveals that 39%, there's a 39% rise in a year in referrals for NHS mental health treatment for under 18s to more than 1 million. There's a rise to more than 1 million children, and that's just referrals. Because I'm thinking about the families that don't make referrals, the families that struggle on their own, or the referrals that don't go through to the NHS, the children that never gets to see CAMHS because CAMHS workers are inundated. The service, they can't manage. So there are people who schools don't make the referral, or if school make the referral, it just don't get there, or parents that try to struggle on their own, and for many different reasons, this might not be reflective of the true number of children that are struggling with mental health. So there's been a huge increase in the number of children requiring treatment for serious mental health problems, including eating disorders, the figures show. So our children are struggling, and that's why we can't afford to still have stigma and stereotypes around mental health. Not when our children are suffering. We have to be able to have the conversation, and to be able to we have to be able to have the conversation in a way that is wholesome and caring and considerate, with lots of compassion. We have to be able to see people with mental health problems as not someone with a deficiency, but somebody like us that needs support and care. And I think it's all of us have to come together to figure out, well, how can we do it? Well, what role can I play in helping a parent who's struggling with a child with mental health? Because sometimes we blame parents and said if they were doing this or that thing, then maybe that wouldn't happen. And I don't think you can blame them more than they blame themselves. Because as a parent, I know that. So the data reveals a 39% rise in referrals to NHS mental health treatment for under 18s. And by comparison, the figure was massively different from 2019, 2020 to 2020, 2021. And I imagine they had 850,741 referrals for children under 18 to mental health services in that year. And I imagine COVID may have had a massive impact on those figures. And of course, we have not perhaps seen the end of that, because we know that COVID has massive implications for mental health. We know that mental health services were really under pressure during COVID. As a private practitioner, practice was very busy during that period because people were struggling so much. So if adults were struggling, of course, children would be struggling too, and not having enough support. So the England-wide data includes children who are suicidal, self-harming, suffering from serious depression or anxiety and have eating disorders. Separately, the NHS digital data also shows hospital admissions for eating disorders are rising among children and young people. And as I'm reading that, I felt this twinge of sadness as I'm reading that, the level of suffering that would be going on. I felt this twinge of, sadness, this sadness that wanted to to creep in around that. And if you're a parent with a child with mental health, and you have not sought support, or you just are tired and you're giving up on the system, don't give up. Don't give up. Keep knocking on the doors that you need to knock on. As we can see, because of the number of referrals and not enough staff, I imagine that sometimes they're taking longer to get to some people. But don't give up. Don't give up. Don't get tired. There's a Bible verse that I love that says, "If we're not weary in well doing, in due season we will reap if we faint not." So don't give up knocking on the doors that you need to knock on to get help for your child. Sometimes we might have to go private. That's what I know. Sometimes we have to go private to get a private counselor to work with our child or to work with our family. I believe when there's mental health, then the whole family will need support, because when the child goes to therapy and come home, we will need to know and understand how to be as a family to be able to support. Because sometimes we're afraid of talking about emotions. Sometimes we are afraid of tackling certain subjects because we don't have a history of talking about it. We don't have any kind of model of what it looks like to talk about subjects that are difficult. So sometimes there's that challenge, and we have to learn how to talk about things. Um, and not avoid it, because sometimes we feel if we say depression, if we say anxiety, or if we say suicidal ideation, that means it's going to make somebody ill. It's not going to make somebody ill, but what it will do is let people know that they can come to you because you understand the language, you understand how to have the conversation. That's what they want. So there were 7,719 admissions just in 1 year. That's massive. And for me, I can't help sometimes when I read these things, I don't just read them as a counselor, I read them as a social worker too. That's my background as well. And I can't imagine that's not only 7,000, over 7,000 young people it admitted. That's over 7,000 families impacted, and their extended families and their friends, all whole communities. So this is that kind of problem. And I think, as I said, it's all of our problems. And that's why I'm here today to talk about as many things as we can cover in a 12-hour period around mental health. The videos will stay here on the channel. I get lots of reports about how um, the benefit that people get by just coming here on a night when they're struggling, and they watch a video and get some support. And it's really, getting some support via video. What's that like? But there is certainly you might listen and hear something that might help you understand your struggles and challenges a little bit. So the data suggests that 2022 to 2023, that's this year, could see the highest number of hospital admissions for eating disorder for people of all ages. And once again, that's a massive crisis. So mental health, we're in a crisis. That's for sure. We're in a crisis with regards to mental health. And so if you're here, if you want to private message me a question, or if you want to private message me a question, I'm going to put I need to find the chat again. I'm going to put my details. I'm going to put my details in the chat so that you can send me a private message if you want that to be addressed or answered here, or if there's any way that we can support you. So I just need to figure out how to find the chat again, because I had the banner on and I want to figure out how do I find the chat after taking off the banner. So you're seeing me operate this live, and yeah. So I'm going to figure out how to add to stream. I removed myself from the stream. I'm going to figure out how to put my details in the chat. So if you're here and you would like to ask any questions, or if you would like any of your question answered, then we'll be able to, yeah, here we go. We'll be able to answer it here, but you can put your questions in the chat. If you know a parent that is struggling with a child with mental health, you know, just then, how can you support? How can you support a parent that is struggling, that has a child that is struggling with mental health? You can just be a support to that parent. You can invite them out, take them to your home, go for walks, make a meal, be a place to listen. Those are some of the things, some of the ways that you can support a family that is supporting a child with mental health. It's not easy. It's not easy. Okay, so there's another news report that I'd like to focus on in this time. A quarter of all the teenagers in England have mental health problems, according to the figures from the NHS Digital. So data published by the NHS Digital shows that 25.7% of 17 to 19-year-olds have probable mental health issues in 2022, compared to the same compared to the year before in 2021. And this is again from Sky News. 1 in 4 older teenagers in England are struggling with mental health problems. 1 in 4. That is a huge crisis, according to new figures that highlights the impact of the pandemic on the younger generation. And I don't know how much we talked about that. I did a lot of speaking around, virtually during the pandemic. Lots of my colleagues did speaking. We did conferences. We did online things. We did a lot of stuff during the pandemic. And I know mental health services did a lot, and everybody was busy. They, doing frontline work, trying to just help people who are struggling to be safe. But the NHS data published shows that 25.7% of 17 to 19-year-olds have mental health problems, and in 2017 the rate was 10%, 10.1%. So that has gone up. Among 7 to 15-year-olds, 18% were found to have mental health problems, and in 2022 it rose by 6%. And these figures are concerning and worrying, of course, because what can we do to help? What is particularly worrying, according to one doctor, is that there's the sharp rise that we see between 2017 and 2020. Those high levels of mental health problems in children and young people have returned to pre-COVID levels. So that means it was high pre-COVID. It got high after, and I imagine that, again, as I said, we still haven't seen the full impact of what that might look like yet. So, is there any good news? I don't like to just focus on news that are not so good. I believe that I'm doing this because I wanted to focus on children in this first hour, because I believe that it's important that we understand what's going on with our children, and we find ways of supporting them and supporting families that are struggling. So here are some of the causes. Here are some of the causes of the struggle. Online bullying. Online bullying is a big cause of the struggle. And educating our children around being online is such an alluring world. It's such a world where everybody is, and all the things are going on. And I mean, when I see my children watching their friends doing live stream, they just on Instagram talking, and everybody just joined. There is massive bullying online and sometimes by other children as well, because social media reported that they have many 1 in 8 of all 11 to 16-year-old users of social media reported they've been bullied online, and this rose to nearly 1 in 3 among those with mental health issues. So that plays a massive role in it. So what's the solution? Do we take them offline? Do we take away their phones? Do we take away gadgets? Do we ban them? What do we do about that? I believe that there are many things that we can do, many solutions that we can make, and I'm sure you'll make the solution. You'll put the solution in. You'll implement the solution that is right for your family. So is taking them offline the solution to the problem? So if online bullying is rising, and 1 in 3 of the young people who who have mental health issues, online bullying is a reason. So taking some offline might be a good thing. Like, how young are they going on online? So that's one thing for us to consider. How much access do they have online? Do we have access to the sites that they have access to? Do we have access to their social media? And I know that people talk about privacy and, you know, giving children room and all that kind of stuff. And again, everybody has their different opinions around that. When my children went online when they were 13, I had access to all of their social media, and I did that for many years, until I said I would until they were 18. The 16-year-olds, I'm seeing some levels of maturity. I'm seeing, a steadiness in response, and so I don't need to monitor as much as I used to. But every text message came up on my phone too. Every conversation came up on my phone too. Everything came up on my phone. I was able to guide from inside, to say, perhaps you shouldn't be involved in that conversation. That those people, you can't have these conversations with grown up. Step back from that one. Don't allow yourself to be drawn in. Don't believe everything you hear or see online. Don't, lots of things. I guided from within. Now, people make different decisions around their children on social media. We decided 13, we're going to give them access to some. And for the 16-year-olds, we're making different decisions around the one that just turned 13 in March. Like, so though the others were accessed a few, this one just have one, because we believe one is enough, and he doesn't need the others. There is one particular social media platform that he will not have access to. I said, when you're 18, you're too young, because what's interesting and important to note with children is that their brain is developing. They're at the stage of brain development that it's really important that we protect them at this time, right? And so that's what we did. By access at 13, we gave access to the others, guided from within. Go on and check. Everything came up on my phone, sometimes on my husband's phone, because they were using our phones a lot of the times. Was able to guide about conversation, was able to encourage and instruct. And even then, it didn't mean that some damage didn't happen. Even then, it didn't mean that there were people who were saying mean things that we had to go undo, damaged, because, and so helping them to understand the world that we're living in, and that there are people online. Somebody's just joined, and we're talking about online bullying and how that has impacted the rise in mental health in children. And we shared with them about the world online. But one of the things that we did was nourish and affirm and encourage and do all that groundwork of building of self-esteem, so that even if they get some things online, that they had some resources to be able to manage. But still, there were times when we had to limit access still, because it's not just children that are bullying children. There are grown-ups online that are bullying children. And I don't think you can have an online page and some people are so irresponsible. They won't go check out somebody's profile to see that they're young, and I can't speak to them like that. They'll just be vicious and attack, especially on issues that are emotive. They'll just be vicious and attack. And so it's important to with this online bullying and the rise in mental health in 11 to 16-year-olds, when we are thinking about our children's mental health, again, you will do what's right for your family, However, we need to consider if this is a cause, what can we do to mitigate against that for our children and our young people? So just to reset the frame, for this first hour of Mental Health Awareness Month, it's the last day of Mental Health Awareness Month, and we're closing out at Wounds to Scars the month by having a full 12-hour podcasting session. I won't be the only one here talking to you for the 12 hours. We're having many special guests. At 10 o'clock, we're having Eddie Hippolyte, and we're going to talk about Black men and mental health. And the topic then is Black Men Don't Cry. So we'll be doing that at 12 o'clock. Not 12 o'clock, 10 o'clock British Standard Time. So join us, and please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification so you'll know that we're here. After this, we're going to cut up all the videos and post them again individually so that people can access, right? So mental health in our children, that's a very a subject that is close to my heart because I have teenagers and I see the struggle and the challenge. And we're talking about online bullying. According to a report by the NHS published by reported by Sky News, there's a rise in referrals to NHS services for children and young people who are struggling with mental health. And one of the causes that has been cited is social media, online bullying. And I was talking just now about how we navigate online bullying, how we navigate the online space with our children. We didn't give them access until they were 13. The older two, the twins, their social media was on my phone for years, and some still are. I was able to see what they were doing, see who they were talking to, see the things that they were visiting. But even then, even while that was happening, and we were even while that was happening, and we were even while that was happening, I'm gonna have to put my phone on airplane mode. Even while that was happening, we were still able to. It didn't stop the damage. It didn't stop the damage from happening. There were things that happened that we still had to undo. So for the one that just turned 13 in March, our last son, we have limited the social media access. How much access? He has one platform, and that's going to be enough. There's one particular platform that we will not let him on until I said, when you're 18, that's old enough, but because by then the brain has different, is developed differently, and you'll be able to manage better. So among all 70 to 24-year-olds social media users, young women were almost twice as likely to have experienced online bullying compared to young men. So for young women, it's 19.5%, and for young men, 11.3%, between 17 to 24-year-olds. So if you have children in that age group occupying the online space, just be aware that these are some of the things that will, some of the things that that are happening out there. The world is not neat. Lots of stuff is happening. So while 3/4 of women, 75%, reported having possible eating disorders, and for men is 4 to 5%. So what we're seeing as well, as I'm reading through this and as I look, is mental health impacts women different to men. Not that not that the causes are not the same, but how it plays out looks different from men to women, and the coping strategies as well differs from according to gender, right? So if you're listening to this, or if you catch this on the replay and you're emotionally distressed, call the helpline, Samaritan helpline. Let me put that in here in the chat. They do really good work. They do really good work at the helpline, or reach out to us. We have counselors. We don't do emergency work, but if you want in long-term support, we can certainly help. If you're a family that is struggling with a child with mental health, as I said at the top of this hour, I would encourage you to also get support for yourself as you're getting support for your child. And I last year, early this year, as I support someone with mental health at our home, accessing services, I see sometimes it's not a simple process. It's not as easy and simple. You have to keep knocking on the door, you have to be persistent, you have to keep calling. And when you're struggling, that can be challenging, that can be hard. But I know that services are overrun and understaffed, and so people in this field has great compassion and empathy. A lot of times it's not a shortage of that, it's just not enough men on the ground, not enough people, and it is a crisis. So I want to share some resource in this time that I have. My first guest is coming on in 15 minutes, and I want to share some resource that I have that I know about. So there's a program there's a program run by Dr. Neil Nedley, and it's called Depression Recovery. The Depression Recovery Program. CO. You can find it online. It's really effective in working with a range of mental health issues, and I think one of the things I hear was not psychosis. It didn't, and schizophrenia, but depression, anxiety, bipolar, and other mental health conditions. It really does work really well. It's a lifestyle type program. So go, if you are supporting somebody with mental health, or if indeed you have your own mental health challenges, then go and check out the Depression Recovery Program by Dr. Neil Nedley. After during the pandemic, and I think they still have this available online, so you don't have to travel to the U.S. I think they're based in California. You don't have to travel there to access it. You can access it online, and get the support, and benefit. They really do get good results. It's heavily research based, and that's one of the things I like about his work. Heavily research based. So go and check out his website, the Depression Recovery Program. Check out his website, check out the program, look at the modules that are in the program. He does a lot around, I took the course many years ago. He does a lot around helping you to understand the brain, helping you to understand how to care for your brain. And I was having this conversation with somebody this week. Now, we care for other organs, but we don't really think about our brain. And when we think about mental health, we need to look after our brains. We need to eat the foods that are going to nourish and nurture our brain. Look at the supplements that we need if we, to help our brains just function at optimum level. Look at our lifestyle and how that contributes to how our brain and the functions of our brain. Look at sleep is a massive thing around our brain. I learned something recently listening to a podcast by a psychiatrist, and he scans brains, and he was looking at eating 3 hours before bedtime. We need to eat 3 hours before bedtime to get good sleep so that our brains can function. And that was really an eye opener for me, because I used to try to follow the principle of not eating, but didn't know why. Well, it wasn't explained to that. It was just around digestion was the reason. Give your body times to digest and rest. And I didn't know that it impacted my brain and how I was going to function the next day. We're learning more things around certain things like sugar. I mean, some of these things are controversial, but test it for yourself. I mean, they're not contraindicated in that they won't make you ill. So, and I'm not saying everybody that's out there have good information that we can embrace and use. Not everybody does, but look at the information, and if the things that you're trying won't be harmful to you, then go for it. Give it a try and see how that might work if you know somebody that's struggling. I know exercise helps, because exercise helps to relax the muscles in the body. It helps to regulate, help us to calm our nervous system. It help us regulate when we're upset, when we're stressed, when we're upset, when we're angry, when we're agitated, when we're in our fight or flight mode. Exercise helps to do that. Exercise helps to with depression and anxiety. It really does help. So I see this again firsthand, supporting people with mental health, with anxiety and depression in particular. So exercise really do help. Now, exercise doesn't mean that you join a gym. It means that you go for a walk every single day. You have to get out, get up, draw the curtains, let the sunlight in. If you're living in the UK, there's none today. Yesterday was amazingly beautiful, but today it's a little bit gray. But still, when the sun is out, you want to go outside, you want to sit in the sun, especially people that are melanated like myself. We need the vitamin D. Vitamin D helps with our moods, and that's researched as well. That's backed by science, that we need enough vitamin D's, and it helps to regulate our mood. So when the sun is out, you're going to want to get up, get out of bed early, draw the curtains and go sit outside so you can get the sun. And you want to go for a walk, take deep breaths in outdoors in the fresh air outside. Inhale and exhale. And somebody said to me last week that, Joanna, you like to tell us to go for walks, and you don't see where I go for a walk, because where I go for a walk is in the countryside, but where you go for a walk is in the countryside. Where I go for a walk is not as, there are no trees. There's a lot of traffic, and I know, and I can understand that when I lived in the city, that was the case. I did not like going for walks because sometimes I thought, what's the point? I'm going for walks, and I'm walking past so much cars, emissions. Am I getting any benefit from this? But you are getting benefit from it. So go anywhere, go anywhere. Even if you have to take the bus to the park or drive to the park, it's a commitment to your mental health that you're getting up and you're going every day, every single day. You're finding a place to go, walk around the block for half an hour, walk up the road for 15 minutes, back for 15 minutes. That's half an hour. And do it at a pace where your heart rate can go up. I promise you, by the time you get back home, you start to feel better. And when you do it regularly, then your body gets used to it, and it starts to remind you that you need it. So don't forget, I'm just reaching out to my guest that is coming on in a minute. Yeah, you need the exercise, and after a while your body starts to tell you that you need to do it. After a while your body will remind you. So that's exercise and nutrition. Eat the foods that nourish your brain. So research that. What are the foods that nourish my brain? I know a lot, but go and do some research around foods that look after my brain, or just research, how do I look after my brain? Read journal articles. Don't just depend on Wikipedia or what's on Google. Go for journal articles. Go for research-based, science-backed information that tells you what you can do to look after your brain. Because when we think about our mental health, that's the organ that we want to look at. So we know sleep really helps the brain. You get enough sleep, it really does help the brain. But we live in this fast-paced society. We're staying up late on a screen. And what they say is that the screen, the phones, the gadgets, the light that is on it mimics daylight. So if you're struggling to sleep, don't go on your phones, because it's gonna tell you that it's daytime and disrupt and do the opposite of what you want. So read a book, listen to a book, but don't take up the screen, because we need enough rest for our brains to function, for us to be able to function at optimal, and to manage our well-being. And if you're here, you're watching this on the replay, and you're struggling with your mental health, if you're struggling with your mental health, my heart really goes out to you. I see the struggle. I know what it's like. But these things really help. You might not want to go out for a walk, but make it like your antidepressant. I have to go for a walk every day. And what I say to people is, rain, shine, snow, hail, go out for a walk. I don't like to get wet when I'm walking, but I've learned that, what, it doesn't do anything to me. I like to hike, and there's this hill that I like climbing here in Wales, and I do it, and I've done it, I think, 4 times now. It would have been 6 if I managed to make it all the way up those other 2 times. And twice I got soaking wet, hail, everything. By the time I return to the car, I am soaking wet to do the drive home. And the drive home is like 20 minutes. It's just like I am soaking, and I don't like it. But it doesn't take away from the feeling of joy that I get. You know, that dopamine hit that I get from just climbing a hill. It really doesn't take away from it, even though you're coming down and hailstones are hitting you in the face, and you're soaking, and your hood is dripping, and your everywhere is dripping wet. Everything is so. Yeah, don't be like me. Get wetsuits, because sometimes I'm coming down and I see some people calmly walking out because they're covered in their wetsuit and they were prepared for the weather. So walking and exercise really does help the brain. Water, water is important as well to feed our organs. So when our body doesn't have enough, it doesn't go to the organs to get it. So we have headaches. If you're like me, if you don't drink enough water, then you're going to have massive headaches, and that's not nice when we're struggling, okay, and in pain. Um, what else? Exercise, nutrition, water, rest, trust. For those of us who are Christians, trust that these things that we're doing is going to be beneficial and is going to provide results. Then that's an important part. The spiritual component is an important part of managing our mental health. So I want to encourage you. I talked about the sunshine and the vitamin D and how it improves our mood. Just going out in the fresh air, deep breathing is massively important as well. So as you can see, they support each other. Those 8 things that I was just talking about, they support each other. One support each other. So here, when's a good time to go for a walk? Maybe after you had your breakfast, go for a walk then. If you're going to work, sometimes I see some people jogging. I drop my husband to work if I need the car, and we're going early, and I see people jogging, and I admire them because that means they're jogging before they go to work. No, you might not jog, you might not like it, but go for a walk. Go half an hour. As I said, 15 minutes in one direction, 15 minutes in the next. That's half an hour covered. Do it after lunch at work. Don't eat at your desk. Get up, and after you've had your sandwich or whatever you're eating, go for a walk, 10 minutes, return to your desk, and you'll find that you're so much more productive, and it really releases the stress. Because sometimes we feel, I'm at work, I'm stressed. That means I need to stay at my desk, I need to eat here, and I need to finish this thing. And it's counterproductive. It's counterproductive. I know that. I work at home. Sometimes I'm with the laptop and I don't want to move. I want to stay. I want to just finish this thing. I was recording and editing videos on Sunday for my Safe Relationship Guide. And my husband came home and said, "You haven't been outside all day." And I hadn't. And it was a beautiful day. And I didn't go outside at all because I just wanted to finish this thing. And then on Monday I paid for it. Don't pay for it. Just get up, go for a walk. So that's nutrition, exercise, water, rest, trust, fresh air, and sunshine. Massive ways to support your mental health. If you're supporting a child with mental health, those things do work as well. Go in their bedrooms, sometimes wake them with and music. Music is really relaxing and good. Awake them with music, classical music with a calming voice. Draw the curtains so the sunshine can come in. Encourage them to get out of bed. Sometimes I make the breakfast, something that I know that they like, and woo them out of bed with that. Routine is really important, and it really does help. Having a routine helps. Having a routine helps children as well. So get them out of uh, having a routine, a structure, having structure. So we're doing this thing at this time and at this time and at this time. So there's something to look forward to. There's a reason to get up and get out. And get support for yourself. Get support for yourself. So as we wait for my guest to come on, I'm going to be talking to Eddie Hippolyte in a minute around not depression, Black men and mental health. Black men don't cry is the topic of this segment, and I'm just waiting for him to come on. So while I wait for him to come on, I'm going to share with you our just details. You'll see it running across the screen. Our Trauma Recover Conference. Our Trauma Recover Conference is June 16 to 18. We have 4 spaces left. So if you're struggling with your mental health, you're experiencing any kind of trauma, or you just would like to come to a retreat where we are looking at giving you tools to support your well-being, then send me a message. My email is in the chat, and I'll send you registration details for the Trauma Recover Conference, which is June 16 to 18. June 16 to 18, and it will be in Worcester. So it's a nice, middle ground for people depending on where you are coming from in the UK. From Wales, it's about the different parts. From where I am, it's about an hour and a half. So that's our Trauma Recover Conference. We do a conference every year since 2017. This year, the Trauma Recover Conference is smaller venue, not small venue, but a smaller number that we're looking at, because I like to serve people in a deep way. This is the first time we're going to come together live since the pandemic, and I'm really looking forward to the level of support that we're going to serve people. Right. So Black men and mental health, Eddie is coming on shortly, and I can't wait to have this conversation with him. Can't wait to share the conversation with him. Okay. Can't wait to share the conversation with him. Let me just see why he is not why he's not on yet. Is there, if you're, I can see that people are here. Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask? Anything? Don't be shy. You can ask anything. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Do you have any questions about Wounds to Scars, about the work that we do? About the work that we do at Wounds to Scars? Do let me know. If you have any questions about the work that we do here, do let me know. Anything. Any questions around mental health while we wait for our speaker, our first guest, to arrive? As we wait for our first guest to arrive, and I'll share a little bit just for context around why we're doing Men and Mental Health. Black Men Don't Cry. I was doing a presentation a couple of weeks ago, and I shared a clip that Eddie and I did, and there was a gentleman that was very upset that I said I talked about men and that he mentioned that men, emotional intelligence and men, because they weren't taught. He was rather upset about that. And he says, I was taught not to cry, but I can be empathetic even though I don't cry. And I thought, that's interesting. How do we become empathetic when crying means I can feel on behalf of myself? If I don't feel on behalf of myself, how can I feel on behalf of other people? And how will I let them know that I do? Is it just through saying that I care? How do I transmit that care for others when I was taught how to not do it for myself? How does that work? So that was interesting to me. So that's why I want us to have this conversation around Black men and mental health. An interesting conversation to have. So if you have any questions about that, then don't hesitate to put that in. Or Wounds to Scars. While I wait for our guest to come in, I will just share what Wounds to Scars is, when we started, how we start, and what's happening. We started in 2016. We started by just blogging. I started by just blogging online on our website, woundstoscars.com. I'll put our website in the chat. So I started by just blogging, and as I do that, the need grew, because I wanted to support people. I wanted to support people in a deep way, and that was one of the ways that I could support people. So that's how it started. And following from just supporting people in that way, then I was able to. We did our first conference. We did our first retreat in November 2017, and in 2018 we did our first online conference. No, first online conference was also 2017. The first retreat was November 2017. So March and November, we tend to do something in spring and in autumn. The retreat is usually autumn. This year we're in June. The autumn retreat will be in November, and that will be in St. Lucia. We only have 10 spaces for St. Lucia. So that's in St. Lucia, November. I think it's November 2 to 5. That weekend in November. I'll start to put details out of that for that this month, June. So that's where our autumn retreat will be, and I'm still looking forward to it. Not only to go to the island, but just to have a wonderful, an amazing time, serving people in a deep way. So that's our autumn retreat, November. We've done a March and a November every year since that time. And we're really proud of the work that we do and the result that we get with people. We're really proud of that. We sometimes have on the podcast people who have attended our events come and share, not just share specifically about what they do. I mean, the way we help them, but just how it has helped. And we're really proud of the work that we do. We have a devotional that's coming out called Come See a Man, that was written by women in our community who have healed and held on to their faith, and they're amazing stories told in that devotional. We've written another book, Overcomers, and that's available on Amazon from again some people in our community. So we're proud of the work that we do. I am absolutely amazed, and I learned so much from the people that we get to serve. Their courage and their tenacity, and their ability to not give up. So yeah, I'm encouraged by that. I'm waiting for a speaker. While I'm waiting for a speaker, if you have any questions, I think I've hidden the chat option again, and I'm trying to find it. What did I do to hide? What did I do to hide it, and how do I find it back? So that's my challenge at the moment, trying to find the chat. So if you've put a chat, something in the chat, I am not able to see. There's also a private chat that you can put your questions if you don't want your questions to be answered online, or you don't want to ask it online. There's a private chat. So I just said hello in the private chat, and you'll be able to see it. You'll be able to see it. I think maybe, oh, here we go. There. I think it was a big button that says comments that I wasn't pressing. I think our first guest is delayed. Our first guest is delayed, and I'm not sure what's happening. 10 a.m. Our first guest is delayed until he comes on. I will carry on the conversation that we were having just now. I'm always prepared. Here's what I will talk about this time: books on mental health, books that can help you with emotions. People always ask me about books, so I'm going to put that as a thing in the chat. Books. People always ask me, what can I read? I'm experiencing this thing. What can I read? And books are very important. It's important because it helps us. We read people's stories, and it helps us. It helps us understand ourselves. Right. So what can I read? So it depends on what's going on. So we deal with trauma, and so sometimes the questions tends to be along those lines. But if you want to understand yourself, what books can I read? So there is many things. I read books via Kindle. Sometimes I have the book on its own, the paperback in my hand. Sometimes I listen to books on Google Play Books. And why I use Google Play Books is because sometimes when you're busy and you're doing things, Google Play Books is very helpful in that regard. So Google Play Books is thank you. Google Play Books is one. If you don't have it, you can probably just download it on your phone, and it helps you. Lots of books on there. I was listening to one by Max Lucado yesterday on Google. So I'm just looking at my Kindle just to remind me of some of the amazing books that I read on top. There's one particular one that I want to share with you while we wait for our guest to arrive. Books helps us understand, helps us, manage our mental health because it helps us understand what's happening. Helps us understand what's happening. There's a new one that I'm starting now, but let me let you know why this particular one is interesting. So there are books on relationships, and maybe I'll do that last. The ones on relationships, but I will do books that can help you right now. So for people who are healing from sexual trauma, Healing the Wounded Heart is amazing. There's a book. They have a book and a workbook. Oh, he said he hasn't received the link. Oh. Just a minute. My speaker hasn't received the link. Oh, he's coming on now, right? So Healing the Wounded Heart is excellent. They have the book and the workbook. I probably will come back to this after because we're gonna go have the conversation now. There is this other one, Untangled, also is written by Carrie Scott. So that's on healing from sexual trauma. If you've experienced that. And my book, Shattered But Not Broken, is also on Amazon. It's a really good one where I share my story of healing. There's one particular one I'm looking for. Shame Interrupted. I cannot recommend that enough. Really, really good around help us processing shame, just understanding some of the underlying messages with shame. There is Trauma and the Struggle to Open Up. Excellent one. Attachment Theory in Practice by Susan Johnson. It's really good in helping us understand our attachment pattern and helping us to understand how we are in relationships and how we show up in relationships. Then there is Becoming Safely Embodied. I do many training on trauma, but Becoming Safely Embodied is, I have to say, one of the best ones that I've seen so far. One of the best. Becoming Safely Embodied is amazing. Really good. Becoming Safely Embodied. And then there is, I'm telling you about books. I probably should put them in the chat, but maybe I'll do that later on. If you would like the names, just let me know, and we will be happy to share them with you. On shame, especially for those like me, myself, melanated like me, You Are Your Best Thing is excellent. It's an excellent resource on shame. It's an anthology. That means a compilation of different authors of Black men and women writing about shame and how that is for them. It's so amazing. When I started it, I could not put it down. I read it in maybe of a couple of days. Boundaries, the book and the workbook. When we have boundaries, our relationships are healthy. If you ever struggle with boundaries or not understand how to set boundaries, that's a good place to start. The Boundaries Workbook, the book and the workbook together. It's good that it's good if you do them together, the book and the workbook together. Okay, here's the author that I want to tell you about, The Gift. And she wrote 2 books that I've read. But I will go in detail about The Gift in my next segment. Let me see. about 1 o'clock. My segment around 1 o'clock. I'll tell you about the gift. But our speakers here, our speakers arrived.
Let's see.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. And yourself? So
I'm all right.
this is a 12-hour marathon then.
I know. My son said to me when I said it first, I said I'm going to do a 12-hour marathon on the 31st to close Mental Health Awareness Month. And my son looked at me and like, Mom, you, because he knows my talking limit is an hour and a half, right? And, and I'm gonna do. I said I'm not gonna talk on my own. I'm gonna have other people come on and talk with me. So this morning, the other one, as he helped me to set up, he said, "Mom, you're not young. You're not as young as you used to be." I'm like, "What does that mean?"
Mercy, man.
What do
Listen,
you what do you
tell him
mean?
I said you need to rate your mom.
What do you mean I'm not as young? I think he's just concerned. He's concerned about me. Like, Mom, you're not as young as you used to be. Why are you doing this? You don't have to. And I'm like, yes, I do.
Yeah, you do, man. You do. You know, you do. Some
He'll
things have to
understand.
be.
One day he'll be stuck at
Yeah,
work.
yeah, he'll get it. He'll be like, man, I can't believe mom used to do that.
Yeah,
What?
yes, yes. But I'm so happy to have you come on. Eddie has this amazing podcast. You should go follow him on. Where can they follow your podcast?
They can follow my podcast. It's on Buzzsprout. It's on Apple Podcasts. It's on Spotify. It's on Amazon Music, and it's just called Four Questions, the podcast.
Mm,
If you type in Eddie Hippolyte there, and it's spelled the way you see it on the screen, it will come up with two things. It will come up with Four Questions, the book. But if you type in Four Questions, the podcast, you'll find a podcast again. But listen to the book as well. So wherever you find
definitely.
those three in those four spaces, that's where you.
Yes.
But the podcast, yeah, we've just finished the first season. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm glad that we was able to finish the first season.
It's really good. So this is how I use Eddie's podcast. I use it as a personal development day. Like, okay, it's personal development day. Let me get my journal and let me sit with the podcast because I know he's going to ask questions that I'm going to want to reflect on. And I just don't want to listen and move on. I want to get the most out of it. So if you like personal development, if you like to grow in self-awareness, it's just that's where you go.
Yeah, and that is intentional. Um, I think one of the things that is too easy is to just hit and move, and because
Mm.
because we live in such uh, uh, a repetitive communication age in which
Yeah.
everything is either repeated or you can just move on to the next thing. You know,
Yeah.
it, we almost scroll our self development.
Yes.
My podcasts are always there's always that section that you hear at the end. Okay, let's do the work.
Mm,
I
mm,
want people to just hang around a little bit, just hang
yeah.
around a little bit, and let's talk. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
around a bit and talk.
It's important. And there's so many people out here saying so many things that
Mm,
it's so easy. So, I'm very intentional about who I let in and what I let in because
yeah.
there's so much out there. So I'm like, okay, so who am I going to let grow me? Who are the people that I'm going to allow space? And what direction do I want my growth to take? Um, and
Well,
those are the questions
I'm
I
honored
answer.
that you allow me to be a part of that process. I'm honored that you allow me to be a part of that journey. Um,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
because like you said, there are a lot of people out there, and sometimes the messages can just they can just be fused into one, you know,
Absolutely.
yeah, just one almost endless recycle of the same
Mm,
thing.
mm,
Um,
mm.
yeah, so yeah,
Yeah.
I'm glad that I'm able to um, be usable. I'm glad that you find me user friendly, and you always give me good feedback. You always give me good, honest feedback, which always helps me to write better, helps me to think better in
Yeah.
in my writing and in my thinking, because you're a professional in that space. you know you know and so it's not lost on me that as a professional you use it as a part of your own personal
Mm.
development, personal and professional development. So yeah, thank you
But
for that.
you're so deep in the things that you said, and I like that. I like depth.
Mm,
So I don't like surface. I like, and so your questions take us to that place, to those places where you're really thinking, where you have to engage with the material, and that's why it's so. That's why I use it, and that's why I recommend it.
thank you, thank you.
So black men don't cry. Thank you. Okay. Black men don't cry.
Not them ball.
That's our topic now that we're having this conversation in this
Yeah,
period, this
yeah,
segment. Black men don't cry.
yeah,
um and like, so that came about because I was doing a presentation at a church, and I shared a clip that you and I did, and because we had two conversations over that period. I think it was last year early,
yeah.
and we shared, and I asked you a question around healthy relationships and men. I don't remember the exact question. That recording is on here on the podcast, on the channel, for those who are new to Rooms to Scars. And I asked Eddie a question, and he's talked about not black men, but just men and emotional intelligence, and because training and all that. But this gentleman he was just not happy with the response. He was just like, well, I was taught not to cry, he said. I was trained to not cry, and that's fine, basically. I can help others. And I'm thinking, I didn't want to disagree with him, because I'm like, okay, so you don't cry, that's fine. But we don't want to normalize that,
Mm,
because not crying is not the same as not things not happening, because the messaging is, if I don't cry, you don't have to cry. I'm thinking, so when you're in a group and other men are crying, are they okay to cry with you because you don't cry? And then I think about, Eddie, the mental health statistics on black men:
mm,
3% more likely to be diagnosed with psychosis, overrepresented on mental health wards, over medicated, over everything.
mm,
But here is somebody saying, well, I don't cry. Um, it doesn't mean lack of emotional intelligence. But I'm thinking that you can't feel for yourself then. I
mm.
mean, you're trained to not feel for yourself. So I wanted to talk to a man about that. And like, where did that come from? He's not from the Caribbean. So what's for me, from the Caribbean, I'd say the root of that would be post-slavery, colonization, all of that kind of stuff. The training, boys mustn't cry, stop crying, what you're crying for. You have to be tough. Men must be strong. All of that kind of message. Where do you think that some of the messaging come from, and such a wide level around men and crying, and how that impacts mental health? That's a
I mean,
lot.
it's a lot. You know, no one no one expresses who they are and how they are in a vacuum. You
Yeah.
know, in our lived experience and in our lived journey, we are told stories. We become the reflections of stories, and those stories come out of experiences. They come out of um, entrenchment in various ideas. They come out of the ways in which we've been forced to see the world. Um, and so I can't speak for where it comes from
Yeah.
in his world. But the question I would ask is, okay, all right, you don't cry, but what then is your emotional outlet? Because we cry for a number of reasons. We may cry because we're happy. We may cry because we're sad. We may cry because we're depressed. In the spiritual community, you may cry because the spirit of God just falls over you, and you. So there are conditions under which the natural response is to feel
Tears.
deeply emotional. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
feel deeply emotional, to feel overcome with emotion. So the question I would ask is, okay, you don't cry, but how do you release that emotion?
Yeah. Right.
The question I would have asked, all right, you don't cry, that doesn't work for you. All right, fair enough. But where
Yeah.
and how do you show and release that emotion? You
Mm,
know what I
mm,
mean? When tears would,
mhm,
when the when the average person would cry because they're
mm.
sad, how do you release that emotion? When the
Yes.
average person would cry out of happiness and being overwhelmed with joy, how do you release that emotion?
Mhm.
That's what I want to know. And who taught you that it was okay? Who taught you that it was okay to be that way? And who taught them that it was okay to be that way? Because
That
sometimes
part.
it's not, it's, you know, you may learn that from your parents, but it's not so much, you know, learning it from your parents. The question is, where did your parents learn that from? Because
Came from
obviously they
somewhere.
learned that and they parented you under the same way. You know, they say, you know, I say it jokingly, but I mean it every time I say it. They say men who don't know how to cry have nervous breakdowns, and men who don't know when to stop crying have nervous breakdowns. You know what I mean? And men who don't know when to stop crying have nervous breakdowns. So the idea being, men who don't know how to release
Yes.
their emotions. You know, I think what it is, we have been socialized.
Mm,
Men have been socialized into an idea of masculinity. Uh,
mm.
Men have been socialized into an idea of maleness um, that that ignores and that cancels the male need for tenderness, the male
Mm.
need for emotional empathy, the male need for um, vulnerability.
Yeah.
Um, we've been socialized into believing that that is weakness,
Mhm.
been
Mhm.
socialized into, you know, and really it's a dysfunctional form of patriarchy. I've always
Mm.
seen it as a dysfunctional form of patriarchy. um, I've always seen it as a toxic form of patriarchy, um, because men are emotional beings.
They are. They're people.
Oh Lord, I mean, because they're, yeah, number one, because they're people, and two, because men are emotional beings. You know what I mean? You don't go and fight. You know, you don't go and fight multiple world wars based on just logic.
No.
You know what I mean? Men are emotional being. Be that emotion, you know, whether or not whether or not it's driven by healthy ideas, or whether or not it's driven by healthy principles. Men do respond emotionally. Men do respond emotionally, and so I believe that as men we've been socialized into this idea that emotion is weakness,
Yeah.
vulnerability is
Yeah.
weakness. Um,
Yes.
and I mean, I reject that. I reject that. Men need. I think what it is with men, we because we haven't been taught how to. We haven't been taught emotional IQ, because men
Right.
haven't grown up. You know, some men haven't grown up largely in places in which they can talk through what's really hurting them and what's really troubling them.
Mhm.
Um, Showing that level of vulnerability for them becomes a weakness, because they don't want it leveraged against them. They don't know if
Yes.
hands that are holding, as it were, their vulnerability are going to be safe hands. They don't know the
Mm.
intentions of the person who's listening to them, you know, speak about how they're doing, and share that they're not doing good, and share that they need help, and share that they've got a mask up, and they they're basically faking it until they make it.
Yeah.
They don't know whether or not that is going to be leveraged against them. And so,
Mm-hmm.
men, because they haven't been taught how to sit in those places and process those places, and because sometimes they can't find spaces of community in which to experience that and to be in that way, they just don't. They're like, no, I'm not.
I'm not
I'm
risking it.
yeah, I'm not risking it. I'm not risking it. I'm not risking it. That has always been, and I think you've heard me say it before. We've discussed it on more than one occasion. That within the Christian community has always been a real that has always been a real problem for those who find it hard to find places of safe transparency. That has
Yeah.
been always one of the real struggles of
Indeed.
ministry and pastors.
Indeed.
Pastors can't
Indeed.
find places in which they can
Yes.
cry,
Yes.
and they,
Yes.
they they can cry safely. Yeah,
Yes.
they can
Yes.
cry
Yes.
safely and sit in that space of vulnerability. Excuse me. And so, yeah, I think it's stories that they've been taught, stories that they've believed, and
Mm-hmm.
stories and ways of being that they've handed down.
Mm,
Handed
mm,
down.
mm, mm. I agree. I'm still stuck back at how it denies them the need for comfort.
Mm,
If you're taught not to cry, then how do you articulate then what you need
mm,
and ask and able to ask for what you need
mm, mm,
if you're not taught how to feel on your own behalf, then you can't say I need this and this what's going on for me.
and it's a core devaluing of your feelings.
Yes.
No, don't cry. No, you're not supposed to cry. No, don't express that. Lord
Mm-hmm.
have mercy, but it's in you, and it's gonna
It's
leak. It's
it,
that,
oh,
that's the mistake
absolutely.
that men make. You
Yeah.
think that this isn't gonna leak.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you cannot allow yourself to express that emotion, as it were, in a healthy way, then
Yeah.
you're going to express it in an unhealthy way. But that emotion is going to be expressed.
Yeah.
I think that's what men don't understand. Like, no, you will leak. It will leak in another way. It will leak either in terms of you just exploding on people, you being hard to live with, whether it be that you pick up you pick up debilitating habits, and you pick up, you know what I mean, really self-depreciating attitudes, that act as a form of tears.
Yes.
you
Yes.
know they become
Yeah.
substitute tears, as it were. But
That's it. Yes.
it's gonna leak. It's
It
gonna leak.
leaks. It leaks on your children. It leaks
Oh,
on your partners. It leaks so many places
it
because it
leaks in
has
the
to.
workplace. It leaks in just the way you may respond to people when you're driving. It leaks in where people are trying to be cordial with you, and you just always have a level of cynicism about people, and cynicism about, and you're always just judging. It leaks. It
It
leaks.
leaks.
It
Yeah.
leaks. It
Yeah.
leaks.
And the message that I want men to take away from this, that will watch, is that, or listen when it goes out in the audio, is that if you've been taught to not feel, and you grew up with that mindset, we know that we know that you're going through things, and what we're saying is that it will come out somehow because it has to, and you might be reaping the results of it coming out in harmful ways to the people that are around you. So maybe start the process of allowing yourself to feel on behalf of yourself, because that's what will make it stop leaking.
Be kinder to yourself. Be
Yeah.
kind. Be kinder with yourself. You
Yes.
know, be 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 more be more aware that you are not wired as a human being. You are not wired as a human being to ignore your feelings. You have to be
Um,
taught as a human being to
to
ignore
ignore it.
your
That's
you
it.
you have to be taught you have to be taught, and you know, you put up these mental barriers that enable you to ignore your feelings. You cannot in any way sit comfortably with the idea that to ignore your feelings is a healthy thing.
Yeah, it's not.
It's not wired that way. One of my favorite stories is Second Kings 20, and the story of Jehoshaphat, where
Mm-hmm.
where enemies are coming against
Yeah.
Israel. And the story says in verse 4, 2 Kings 20, it says, when the king gets the news, it says the king was afraid. The king the king didn't even hide
Pretend.
it.
He was
Yeah, he didn't
afraid.
even pretend, he didn't even front. The story says the king was afraid. And what did the king do? The king called up the whole nation, come up to the temple, we're gonna pray, we're gonna fast, because and he started to pray. And in his prayer, he said this: we are powerless and we are clueless, but our eyes are on you. Look now, for a man, that is an absolute nightmare, as a man, as a leader, as a father, as a boss, as a manager, to be in the position where you are powerless and
And
clueless.
clueless.
That is, but the king's vulnerability in that moment, what was the key to his vulnerability? He says, we are powerless and we are clueless, but our eyes are on you. So what he was
Yeah.
doing, he was making space. He was making space for God to intervene. He prayed and he asked God, are you not God? Do you not
Mm.
rule? Do
Mm-hmm.
you not deliver? Will you
Mm-hmm.
not act? So in
Mm-hmm.
all of the places that he needed help, he was making space.
Yeah.
After we
Yeah.
prayed his prayer, what happens? A young person hears his pray. What I mean? The
Mm-hmm.
young Jahaziel, one of the young priests, and he says, "Oh, King, I got a word. I got a word from God. Don't fear. The battle is not yours; it's God." Now, if that king wasn't willing to sit in
Mm-hmm.
his humanity,
Mm.
recognize his fear, embrace his fear, cry out to God. You know what I mean? If he would have done like what most men do, is like front it, hide it, go with fear into the situation, lead people into a situation where you're fearful, where you don't even know what you're doing, you're powerless and you're clueless, but you're not telling everybody how you're doing. And so in the end, you dead and everybody else around you dead. If the king would have done that, then you know what the result would have been. But because the king was willing to actually sit in that, allow his vulnerability to be seen, allow his fear to be seen. I don't know if the king cried. I don't know what he did. But the king allowed himself to be seen as fearful. He
Yeah.
allowed himself to be seen in his vulnerability. Somebody else picked up, you know what I mean, and received the message, which means that if you put yourself in a position where you allow your vulnerability in a safe space. Now, the king did it in front of the whole nation. You know what I mean? Maybe you ain't going to find your whole nation, but for the king, that was his safe space.
Yeah.
Safe place was his safe place. Number one was at the temple. His
Yes.
safe community. Number two was the whole of Israel.
The
So
whole of
it's
it.
the lesson is find a safe space, find a safe community. It
To
may
do
not
it.
be as big as Israel, and it may not be at church, but you can find place and you can find people, and allow your vulnerability and your tears and your anguish and your need to be expressed in that
In
space.
that space. In
In
that
that
space.
space, because in that space, your answer and your healing is found.
That's it. That's it. I'm so glad you said that. A safe space and a safe community. And when Glenn, I'm getting Glenn and one of the other men that did the program with you
Mm,
here, how beneficial it was for them. He lost his mom earlier
mm,
this year, and see the support that he got from one,
mm,
because people don't always know how to do that. So he's
mm,
learning. I'm just gonna say I'm not going to church today because I'm not good. I'm in
mm,
grief. I'm not expected to be okay 3 months after I lost the most important person in my life.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to take me a while to navigate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes, I wonder anyway, sometimes that's what people fear as well, because they don't know where the safe space is. But you said the king's safe space was Israel. Sometimes we want our safe space to be a church, but it's not.
It's not always
Sometimes,
going to be a church, you know what I mean?
yeah,
But for the king, his safe place was the temple. His safe people was Israel. All right. Well, if that's your safe place and your safe space, then king, go be vulnerable in that space. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Um, and the lesson coming out of that is that the answers aren't always going to be found in you. But if you allow yourself to be vulnerable, the answers can come to you.
oh, see, that's why I listen to the podcast because because that's true. Because
Yeah,
he allowed himself to be vulnerable, and the answers came from a young man. Are you
yeah, the answers was
are you
there.
open enough?
And
Yeah,
he opened up, the young person heard,
yeah,
heard the king and asked the same questions, and God spoke to him and said, speak to the king. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And the king was
yeah.
reminded the battle is not yours, it's the Lord's. Now this is
Mm-hmm.
what God wants us to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the king was
Mm-hmm.
humble enough to take the answer. It wasn't my you listen, quiet man. You don't see big people around here pray. You know?
The people of prayer.
Yeah,
you know,
the king was like that. No,
yeah,
no. If you're gonna be in that space where if you're going to be in that space where if you're going to be in that space with the people who you know are safe, trust the answers that come from them,
yes,
because
yes.
their heart for you is a pure heart.
See, there you go again. Like, so how do they find their safe space? Because you said your safe space doesn't have to be a church. It might be with people who
Mhm,
are able to provide
mhm,
that. But find it, and in that space, allow yourself to feel and
mhm.
listen for the answers that come in that space.
I-
And there might be great trepidation as men listen,
mhm.
because like, and women, because sometimes we don't always know how to be in our safe space. My next guest is here. Marcia, we're gonna put you on soon, right? We don't always know how to be in our, or how do we find safe spaces? What do we do? How do we do it?
Well, a safe space, listen, a safe space can be anywhere. A friend of mine, she's been our friend for 30 years, 30 plus years. She was the chief bridesmaids at my wife's wedding. About 6 weeks ago, she lost their mother.
Um,
6 weeks ago, she lost her mother, went home to St. Lucia to bury her mother, got back. 3 days later, she lost her husband.
ooh,
Yeah, yeah,
well,
yeah. I mean, in terms of grief, she hadn't even had time to begin mourning her mother,
no,
let alone.
compounded.
And she was just running around like a headless chicken. Her and my wife Yvonne, just in constant contact. You know what I mean? We talk as well across WhatsApp, but and Yvonne was talking to me about how she's doing, and I just sensed no, and I woke up that morning, sensed in my spirit, listened to the spirit, sent her a message. You need to drop everything. You do not have the bandwidth. You do not have the agency. You do not have the emotional strength. You need to drop everything and come out here to us.
Wow.
And I said, don't overthink it. You know what I mean? I said that to her on a Thursday. By the next week, Thursday, she had pulled up at Sydney Airport, and she spent
Wow.
spent 2.5 weeks with us. You know what I mean? And we
Cared
poured into
for.
her, loved on her, poured into her, and she went home last week. She went home last week. For her, that was her safe space, and that was her safe people, and it was
Mm-hmm.
safe enough for her to just drop everything. You know, she said, Ed, when I got the message and I listened, she said, I broke down in tears because I realized, yeah, that's exactly how I'm feeling. She played it to
Yes.
her daughter, and her daughter said, Mum, what are you waiting for? Book the tickets and
Mm.
go. It's
Go,
all right. Go, you know.
go.
And she came. Your safe space doesn't have to be across the other side of the world. Your safe
No.
space can be a front room. Your safe space can be a cafe. Your safe space could be in the park. You know what I mean? It's a combination of the place and the people that make it safe, because it's
The
what you
space.
share in that safe space.
It's
You
what
know
you
what I mean?
share in it. It's what
What
you
you
do with
share
it.
in that safe space. that,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and like I said, if you trust people enough to bring them in, whether it be one, two, or more, to come into your space, and you know the heart that the people have for you and the love that they have, and you share in that space, then you must trust the answers that may come. Because sometimes when you're in your head, you can't hear yourself,
No.
and you have to get your head out of your head sometimes. And the only
Mm-hmm.
way to actually do that is to sit and allow people to listen to you objectively.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? They feel
Mm-hmm.
for you emotionally, but they're
Mm-hmm.
listening to you objectively,
Yeah.
and they're reflecting back to you. But you know they're reflecting back to you with love. You know that they're reflecting back to you with concern. They are
Yeah.
reflecting back to you in all of the empathetic ways in which you need. Listen
Yeah.
to the answers, listen for the answers, because the answers are going to come.
They're
Or
gonna.
remember, the answers actually maybe stuff that's already in your head, but you just
Mm-hmm.
you're avoiding it. But the moment you say it, somebody says it, and you're like, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. Yeah.
I knew somebody was going to say this. I've been avoiding it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you can trust it. So yeah, I think, and men need that. I've said it to you enough times already. The one thing that I do love about doing men's conferences and men's weekends, I love listening to the testimonies of the men whose wives sent them to the weekend. They were sent. Some came, you know what I mean. Some are sent, and some are sentenced. You know what I
No.
mean? Listening to the ones who are sentenced, not the ones who are sent. Or
Yeah.
sent and sentenced. And they always start with, I never wanted to come here. I'm serious. But man, I've been sitting through this first session, and I'm just so, I needed this. I didn't even know I needed this. I didn't even know how much I needed this. You hear it all the time. I've never held a men's conference, and I've held men's conferences and spoken at men's conferences, I don't know, the past 25 years. And I've never been at a conference where I've never heard that testimony. I didn't plan on being here, but man, I'm so glad that I'm here. And so
Mm.
I think what we have to do is we have to normalize men sitting in their fields. We have to
Yeah.
normalize men being vulnerable. We have to normalize men crying and sit there
Yeah.
and just, oh, brethren, ball.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cry out, bro. Cry out. You know what I mean?
Right.
And put an arm around a man, your hand on a man's head while he bawl, and sit there. And sometimes sit there and cry with him.
Mm.
Sit there and cry with him. If you're feeling it with him, sit there and cry with him. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You're going to cry in such a way that you enable him. But you sit there and feel, what does the Bible say? Rejoice with those who rejoice with those who rejoice, and mourn with those who mourn. Mourn with those who mourn. And so I
Yeah.
think we have to normalize that. I think as men
Yeah.
have to create space, because I think a lot of men want to do that. They don't. I don't think they want to be like boo, 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 who wet rags. But man, they do want to just let it go. They do want to let it go. And I think that's the thing that we can. I think that's the thing that we have to normalize. All right, let it go, bro. Let it go.
Let it go.
Let
It
it
sounds
go.
like it's a holding space
Mm.
that takes space is where you can be held. My first time experiencing that was when I was training as a counselor, and we
Mm.
do personal development group. Personal
Mm.
development group was painful because there's a facilitator, he's a psychotherapist, but he sits in the corner and he can't guide you, but he will tell you when you're ignoring what's in the room. So we will all we will all go sit down. Thank you so much, Marcia. We're gonna put you on soon. We will go in that room. The eight of us will sit down and nobody's talking. And he will say, "You're all ignoring what's in the room." I would be like, "Nobody spoke. What's in the room?" But what's in the room is what's in us. Our challenges, the things that we're trying not to talk about, is in the room, and it can be felt, right? And so, as he said that, and we're all irritated now at him, not because he said anything wrong, because we know we were ignoring. So of course somebody will drop it in the space and we will all talk through it. And somebody else will drop something else in the space and we'll talk through it. And that 2 years was the best part of the program for me, because of what I admit that again, that's why I like your podcast, because it does a similar thing for me when it's a holding space. And it's the first time I experienced that, when I felt like I could fall, but I knew I wasn't going to ever hit the ground because I was being held so well. I was being held so well by these women that I could say anything. I could bring anything in that holding space and it would be held. It would not be judged. It would be heard. It would be listened to. It would be affirmed. And I could go away not feeling naked. And that's the beautiful thing about vulnerability when you're in a safe space. You do it, but you don't feel exposed. You feel held. That's why I feel held. And that's what I do in my retreats, so that people can come knowing that this is a holding space and you can just be in this space. You can just be what you need to be. I know it's not as easy for men because of that, so much training, as you said, a toxic patriarchy that gives them the impression. But I'm concerned, like I just read some research around mental health and young people in the UK, some research that was published by the NHS, and the rise in mental health among the young people, and 19 to 24-year-olds and 11 to 18-year-olds. And we have to give them a message to our young men that it's okay to cry, it's okay to feel, it's okay to let yourself feel what you're feeling, it's okay to cry it out, talk it out, find a safe space to be with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And if I could say anything to that generation, I would say you need to find your community of safety and find your community of vulnerability, because there's going to be strength, there's going to be power in that place of safety, and there's going to be
Absolutely.
strength in that place of vulnerability.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
going to be power and there's going to be strength.
There
But you
is.
need to find your place of safety and find that place of vulnerability. Don't sit in a space, and don't normalize abnormal behavior. You know what I mean?
No.
Let me change the word abnormal. Don't normalize don't normalize the trivializing of how you're feeling. Don't normalize,
Mm.
the trivializing of your tears. Don't
Mm-hmm.
normalize the trivializing of talking it through. You know what I mean? Instead of fighting it out, cussing it out.
Ah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Stabbing it
Yeah.
out, shooting it out. Don't normalize that.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
all that is just all that is an expression of the same grief, the same rage, the same hurt, just negatively and
Mm-hmm.
dysfunctionally expressed. And if you would
Mm.
have found a little space in which you could have talk it out, you could have cry it out, you could have talk it through, you could have work out your responses, you could have work out why you want to respond in a certain way and why you were taught to respond in that way, but why
Yeah.
that has never worked for you, you know, you wouldn't see any of these. Now, obviously, I know that there's a whole other
Oh, yeah.
set of reasons,
Yeah.
that have to do with the environment, that have to do, with socialization,
Yes.
and have to do with forces beyond them. But
Yes.
in that space of you living and your lived experience in that space, and you navigating that space in ways that are healthy and in ways that are not problematic, and non-confrontational. Um, find the spaces in which you can do that. Those and find healthy spaces in which you can do that. And if you can't find them, create it.
Created. I
John,
was
look
just
around
gonna
you
say,
who are healthy people. Look
yeah.
around you who do speak well. Look
Yeah.
around you at who
Yeah.
do handle their and pull them into your corner. Create a circle and pull them into your corner. Ask, will you come into
Mm.
my corner and teach me how to do what you do? Can I walk alongside you? Find somebody who will mentor you in that. Find somebody who will
Mm.
mentor you in that, and walk alongside them. Walk alongside them. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
I, I
I do a course. I just finished it, the Safe Relationship Guide for
mhm,
churches to do with young people around what safe relationship looks like. And
mhm,
as I did some focus group yesterday morning with different young people, and they're willing to talk and open up. And I think one of the
mhm,
things that we can do as we wrap up, one of the things that we can do to help is to acknowledge when something is wrong and go offer comfort, go talk, go hug, go do something. Like somebody rang me this week and is concerned about a family member, and they were gonna go via another person to, and I said call them directly. I said let them know that you know and that you care and you want to help, because I think when we can, and it's a male, when we can do it so directly, then it helps. Like say, I see you. How are you? You've just experienced this trauma. How are you feeling? And check in
mhm,
regularly so this
mhm,
person know that they know that there's care. Somebody cares about them. I know I'm checking in. I know that you've just experienced this loss. I know that you're struggling with this thing. How are you
mhm,
doing? How are you feeling? So
mhm,
we're not ignoring, and we
mhm,
can, so we are bringing the thing in the space so they know that okay, so that's one safe person
mhm,
at least that I
mhm,
have, because they're
mhm.
acknowledging that this is hard for me. Who else around can do that?
Because if we don't, then everything around us and within our faith community just becomes performative. And I
Yes.
think that really, more than anything else, I think that is what is driving young people. And it's interesting. There's a thought that young people are leaving um, the faith community. No, they're just leaving your faith community. They're just
That's
finding,
it. Give it
they're not
context.
walking out on God. They're just walking out on hair. They're like,
That's
no, no,
it.
I'm not doing it with you lot anymore.
Give context. I just don't want to. I'm not doing the
Yeah,
fakeness.
I don't have to do it with. Yeah, I don't have to do this. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't
Give
have
it
to do
context.
this. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it behooves us. It behooves us to to create those spaces of um, transparent community and create those spaces where we do check in, where we don't go through third parties. Just go direct. Just
Direct.
go direct. You know what I mean? Yeah, just
Yeah.
go direct. I think that it will create spaces of transparent trust.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it will
Yeah.
create spaces of transparent trust.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much, Eddie. Thank you so much for coming
Oh
and
man,
talking to
thank
us
you.
about this really important subject. And we love
It's been a
having
pleasure being with you here.
you.
Lessons as you head across the next 11 hours.
Yeah.
And I put it like that, Lord. You know what I mean?
And I think the bit that I have so I have Marcia now waiting, and Marcia and I will be here for about 45 minutes or so.
Uh-huh,
And then I have a 3 o'clock, I have a 5 o'clock, which will take about 2 hours.
uh-huh.
And then I have a 7:30 and an 8 o'clock. So
Mm. All right.
I do have people to come and talk with me.
Now it's about 11 o'clock now. Yeah,
Yes,
you're getting through. You're getting through. You're getting
I,
through.
I
It's 11 now.
I'll get through. I mean, what's important, I have people with me. I see some people are on, and I really appreciate you. You can send us a
Nice.
message privately, or you can,
Where are
you know,
you? Are you on YouTube?
yes, I'm live on
On your
YouTube. Yeah,
YouTube channel? Yeah, yeah, yeah. All
yes,
right
it's
then.
on my YouTube channel.
Head
Yeah,
over to your YouTube channel.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, when you spoke about your friend with grief, I have a bereavement support group that starts this Friday.
Mm.
6 people only, that
Okay.
we're gonna go through. So there's one spot left.
All right
If
then. I'll
if
yeah. Thanks for that. Thanks for letting me know that.
Yeah,
Thanks for letting me know that. Yeah. I
yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Take care.
All right. Bye. Well, hello, Marcia. Thank
Hello, hello. How are
thank
you?
you for waiting.
That's absolutely fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh,
Okay. Were you hearing Eddie saying, "Well, how are you going to manage? Good luck for the next 11 hours."
oh, yeah, at least you'll be able to get some breaks in between. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to have a break perhaps after us and have some breakfast, and then I'll come back on and carry on like that.
Yeah.
That's how I do it. Yeah. So, and I so appreciate that people are here and they stay through the conversation with Eddie. If you have any questions or insight, please let me know. So I'm going to be with Marcia now, Marcia Hilton. Marcia, do you want to tell us about who you are and all that good stuff before we start talking?
Okay. So, yeah, my name is Marcia Hilton. I am a life coach. I specialize in working with women to break free from the patterns of toxic relationships and help them to create healthier new ones. I am also a mum. I have 3 sons, one of whom has a diagnosis of schizophrenia. And I am now also a carer for my grandson, who is 10, who is neurodiverse and has some behavioral and emotional issues as well. So, yeah.
Oh, whew. That's a lot. That's a lot on your plate, Marcia. But
Yeah.
I'm just so thankful that you could come. We have these conversations. 2 years ago, we were supposed to do a conference that
Yeah.
just never happened, and I really wanted to have a conversation because I believe you have such good insight on mental health, and just how to support. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for coming on to talk to us about that.
Mhm.
I was just reading some not research, some statistics around young people and mental health, Marcia, and how that's increasing. Um, and I know we haven't finished seeing what COVID did to our mental health. Um, we haven't stopped seeing that. But I wanted to hear from your perspective, like you're supporting somebody with mental health. What is that like as a mom?
It's heartbreaking, painful,
Mm,
and at times really lonely, because
lonely.
you can be around, family and friends, but they can go home.
Yeah.
You are in it all the time. And sometimes I find that as much as you can get the support, people will do their best to support you. It's really hard to kind of move into a space where you can just be for a little while, and not
Yeah.
necessarily, and it isn't necessarily that everybody understands what you're going through,
Yeah.
and understand the decisions that you might make about how you move forward with what's happening, especially with your child.
Yeah.
I mean, my son now is 33, and he had his major, yeah, and he had his major breakdown when he was 15. So it all started. So it's about 18 years.
Whoa.
And am I all right to share a little bit about what happened with him there?
Absolutely. Yeah. Please.
Yes. So he to all intents and purposes, he was, happy, carefree, lots of friends, very sociable, teenager. And then I noticed that his behaviour started to change a little bit, and and I was thinking, oh, this teenage rebellion thing is kicking in a bit late. He's now 15, nearly 16. And I didn't initially realise that there was a mental health issue. And I am coming from a health background. My background's nursing and medicine, so but it never really kicked in.
Of course.
So one day I got a phone call from school to say that he'd cut his hand, and they were calling an ambulance. And I remember thinking, he's cut his hand, but they're calling an ambulance. I thought that was a bit extreme. But I worked at the hospital at the time, and I said I would meet them in A&E. So when I got there, he had this big cotton wool wrap on his hand. And when they unraveled it, his hand just fell open. And what he
Whoa.
did was punched the window through and pulled his hand back. And when he pulled his hand back, that's when the injury had happened. But that was the start, really, of something not right. And I struggled to get the right support right then. I sought different places to try and get the help, because by this time I knew something wasn't right with him. And, you know, I was getting things from the GP like, oh, he's just a bit depressed, just give him a healthy diet and get him to exercise. And I'm thinking, if I can't get him out of bed, how am I even going to get him to eat healthily? You know, so there was those practical things that that I struggled with. There wasn't anything to kind of help you, to help me manage all of this, until he had a psychotic episode. And I had to take him to the hospital. And
how long did that take? How long did that process take?
What, from when he became ill to
yeah.
We're talking weeks, maybe three weeks from when it was first starting to happen. But, you know, looking back on that, I can see a pattern that things were building up, but I didn't recognize it. But from the moment he had that hospital admission to when he got, you know, with his hand, to when he got sectioned, you're talking weeks.
Okay.
And I remember them sectioning him and putting him in an adult ward, because there were no spaces. Yeah, adult ward. And just the trauma of having to leave him there. That was my child. And yeah, so that was sort of the beginning of all of his walk, really, with this diagnosis of schizophrenia. And it's only in recent times that I can even say the word, because it was not something that I wanted to accept.
Right. It was hard for you to accept that that's what was going on with your baby.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a long time, Marcia. I mean, what response did you get, like, for a young Black boy with schizophrenia, and the things that would come with it? Was it easy to get access to care, or how did you find it?
It was very difficult. You know, there's this thing between, you know, because over the years, you know, I can tell when he's becoming unwell. So you have this moment where you can see things are spiraling.
Yeah.
My son himself is not accepting that he needs help. You're trying to access services to come and help him. Oh, he's got capacity, so we can't really do anything until it spirals. So you've got this bit where you know something is happening. Then you've got this bit, which is the acute bit, but it's all that stuff in the middle. What happens? It's that middle bit that I really struggle with, because it's you just feel like you're wading through treacle to try and get the help before you get to that crisis point. But there doesn't seem to be anything. There's no wraparound service that helps you to manage all of those things in between. So you're just walking from one crisis
to another. Yeah. Wow. It would have been so nice if they could work with you. You are there, you're seeing him every day. You know what the buildup looks like, to get it before it gets to an acute stage where maybe he could enjoy a different kind of life, where he never gets to crisis, because it can be spotted early and things can be put in place early before it gets there.
Yeah. And the other difficulty that we have with my son is the fact that he will not take medication. When he originally had medication, they medicated him to the point where he was dribbling.
Oh, wow.
And was quite, you know, it blew him up as well. To the point where I've had to say to them, you need to stop the medication and look at an alternative. And that really put him off as well. Oh, are you there? Oh, you just disappeared.
I'm here.
and that put him off taking medication. He's open to other, alternatives. So if there's something more herbally or whatever. I'll share an experience, actually. We moved to Wolverhampton from Leeds, which is where I'm from.
Oh, you moved from Leeds?
Yeah, I moved. I'm back now, but we did move, and part of that was trying to change the environment for him and all of that. And there was an organization there called the African Caribbean Community Initiative.
Oh yeah, I know them, yes.
Yeah, they were, oh my goodness, they saved my life. And I remember one of the services that they offered there, if the young people didn't want to take medication, there was somebody there that could help them with some other alternatives. That it might be, herbal stuff, alternative stuff like that. And whether, and they would take it. My son would take those as opposed to taking, the prescribed medication. When we came back to Leeds, there was in one of his crises, we tried to, I went with him to a consultant appointment, and basically what it was you take the medication or we strike you off, we won't see you anymore.
Oh,
and that's
wow.
what happened. So, Marcus was saying, my son, he was saying, I'm happy to look at alternatives, but I just don't want the medication. So there's nothing
in between.
So it's either, from the medical side of things, it's either you take this or nothing.
Or we won't see you.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. So he has no, at the moment, if anything should happen, I would now have to go back through the crisis team in order to get some help for him. So there's no regular follow-up with him now. There's no checking, having his, going to his GP actually and just having regular checks. I have to chase that up with him. So, make sure that he eats properly. Those kind of things. So it's managing those things. So I have to check in with him all the time. There's no recourse for any help elsewhere. We have to wait until there's a crisis. Yeah.
Only a crisis. So what I'm hearing you say, if he was under the care of a psychiatrist, then he'd have regular appointments. He'd be seen, but it was this all or nothing. You either do this or I can't. You don't have a space here. We're not going to look after you if you're choosing to not do what we say.
Yeah.
It's almost like a punishment.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really difficult because, a lot of people like my son are isolated because they don't necessarily want to join a community group. He just feels that that's not for him. He'd rather be, on his own, which again, for me, we are social beings. We were created for community. We're created for relationship. And outside of the family, he doesn't have any of that. And I worry because he's now 33 and from the age of 15, he's been isolated. What kind of life is that?
Yes.
So it hurts my heart every time. I mean, he functions, he's got his own place now. He drives, he does, lives in a relatively normal way. But it isn't just, he's existing rather than living. And how can we support him and people like him to be able to live the life without, so that they're not in that sort of isolation. And there's only myself and other members of my family that he can rely on.
Right. He doesn't have friends. I imagine it's not so easy to keep friends.
Yeah.
When you're struggling with mental health.
Yeah. And he kind of pushed them away as well because he just wants to keep himself. Because obviously he's well aware of what's happening for him. And I don't know whether there's, he will not accept, the label that has been put on him. I know that there's an element of shame for him attached to that.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to work through some of that with him because he won't engage.
He won't engage with
it. To talk about what's happening for him. Yeah, it's really difficult. And, you know, sometimes, you know, he'll call me and, you know, he's in, you know, you can tell that he's agitated or, you know, he's hearing voices or whatever. And it's helping him to manage that. You know, I think, you know, you know, and I do believe that he's blessed in the fact that he's rarely had to be sectioned, and we try and manage it, you know, ourselves. I remember there was one time when I was living outside in Sheffield, and I got a phone call from him. He was so distraught, and I thought he was out on the road running because he was breathing so hard. And I said, "Well, where are you?" And he said, "He's at home." And I had to. It was going to take me 40 minutes to get from Sheffield to Leeds. I had to call his brothers, call, you know, other family members, and the police to make sure that, you know, to make sure that he was safe, because I worried about what he would do to himself. And I remember getting across to Leeds, and he was really agitated. They had the mental health team come out, the crisis team, and they assessed and said, yeah, he needs to be in hospital. The police couldn't take him because he was in his own home, but because the reception in his flat at the time wasn't that great, he'd stepped outside of the flat to use the mobile, and the police put handcuffs on him. And I was devastated.
Oh, wow.
Devastated. And even now, when I think about it, I want to cry, because what they did was, there was this criminalization.
Let's criminalize it, yes.
Of his, you know, his condition, you know. And I remember him looking at me and, you know, well, he was saying to the police, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" And they were saying, "Well, it's for your own protection. We want to, you know, to keep you safe. We're going to take you to the hospital." And I remember him looking at me and saying, because by this time I'm crying, because I just thought, why? You know, he's not done anything. And I remember crying, and he looked at me and said, "Don't worry, Mom." He says, I'm going to be back home later. It's okay. I'll go with them. And he did. And so me and my sister were driving behind the police car, got him to hospital. And they did their assessment, but it took time. So I had to go home. And I remember getting a phone call at 3 a.m. from my son saying, "Mum, have you got my car keys? Because I'm going home." I thought he was joking, because I felt at that point he really needed something now to get him back on track. And I just assumed he was, in what's the word I'm looking for? He was being delusional. I just thought, oh no, and then I rang the hospital and said, "Oh, you know, my son said he's going home." And they went, "Yes, he is." I was dumbfounded. And I'm saying, why? But the thing is, when they came to do the assessment, there are certain criteria that he has to, the tick box to say whether he can be sectioned or not. And I think he had enough insight, to answer in particular ways so that he didn't get sectioned. But he clearly wasn't well, and so there's an opportunity that was missed there.
I thought they'd be wise to that. They'd be wise to how clever.
Yeah. And then another time, I think it was around about that same time. They wanted to section him again, but there were no beds, so they were going to send him 200 and odd miles away for a bed, and I had to withdraw my consent because there's no way that I was going to allow them to send him away. 200 and odd miles down south. How would we get to him? And you hear about this all the time, where they do that to people. And then, he was let go at 3 o'clock in the morning in Leeds, where I was living. Can you imagine if that had happened 200 miles away?
Yes, and they say, okay, you can go where? How? Yeah.
And that's how we end up with, you walk out, you go out on the road and you'll see people who are homeless, people with mental health issues, who have been transported so many miles
away.
No reason to get back home. Get
back home. And this is what you talk about, the wraparound service that would really be helpful in times like this to, I'm discharging a man he came in because there was concerns about his health, but he doesn't meet the criteria for admission, but can you get him home?
Absolutely.
Like that's what we would need. But money affects everything, isn't it? Funding.
Absolutely.
And they're not funding services like this, and so there's very little. We're in a crisis with mental health, but there's still not enough money to fund the crisis.
Absolutely. And I think, one of the things is looking at how we as a community can support. It almost feels like you've got to do it for yourself, and it's very sad, and so in Leeds there is this idea that maybe as parents, as mothers, that we can get together to do something. What that might look like, I don't know. At least there's this whole thing around supporting one another, and that's the other thing, because I am happy to talk about my experience, but not everybody is.
No.
And sometimes I've been in situations where I've shared a little bit of my story, and then the women will say, gosh, that happened to my son. To me, my son isn't well. And all of this, and there's so much trauma in the community, but we're not necessarily sharing that. We're not necessarily always getting the support that we really desperately need, because we don't know. How can we support if we don't know our community? But so it's really working around to change that, and then looking at ways that how we can support ourselves, because the services at the moment are just not there. And then I have my grandson who is 10. Has issues as well. He's not in school full time. So he is educated across 2 provisions to support him, and he's now 10 because he has some behavioural issues. There's something around language that is changing that I'm noticing. So and he's 10, and we're getting words like intimidating, scary, all of those, and this is not gonna.
Do you always have to be educating professionals around the language that they're using and the implication of those languages? Because if they're using language as a child that's neurodiverse with behavioral issues, of course, but lots of people don't understand and know how to work with. And so but as opposed to see the deficiency on this side, then it's projected out, so they're intimidating and language like that is used. So it sounds like on the road to criminalizing.
Absolutely. And this is a conversation that I have had with school and with the alternative provision, and that's those conversations are difficult, particularly when also as well the added layer to that is that there's nobody that looks like him. And when I broach that, I get resistance, defensiveness. And what I am doing at the moment now is I'm withdrawing him from the alternative provision and looking for private tutors to help him get back up to speed. And so that means he wouldn't be and this is something that I've had to do before. Withdraw one of the things that I think contributed to my son's mental health was the experience that he had at school. So it was similar experiences. For me, it's like deja vu.
It's happening again.
Yeah. So this time I'm much more aware that I can maybe intervene
earlier.
So it's things like he gets therapy now, so I've had to find that for him. And other things that I've had to go out and find myself, which really school and the alternative provision should have been doing. To get the neurodiverse diagnosis, I have had to do that. School hasn't done that.
School didn't do the assessment?
No.
They just had it in a box of problematic behavior.
Yeah, they've
And
known that that there's been issues since he was 4. I mean, I only got involved with my grandson about 5 years ago, so he was 5 when. Yeah, that's right. So he'd and then he's been living with me for the past 3 years. So they've known all this time that there's been an issue. There is something called the EHC1, which they did do, but in terms of getting a diagnosis, picking up on certain things, even like his coordination, how he, his muscle tone, things like that should have been picked up. And when I've broached it with them, it was ignored. So I went ahead and got things put in place, and that's how we got the diagnosis for him. And now that hopefully will open the door to, for proper support for him. But in the meantime, what I've had to do is withdraw him from that, alternative provision, because I can see where this is going. And so
right.
I've got more than one grandchild, and I love them all, and I should be able to enjoy them, and not have to be doing this and the fight again. So, but I'm doing it because difficult.
You're doing it, but things repeat, and what you're seeing is this looks familiar. Let me not. These are some things that I know about this because it looks familiar, and we're not going down that road.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So do you let them know via letter why you're withdrawing and the things that you're unhappy about?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I have sent an email, and I have said that I'm deregistering him from that particular provision. I still think he needs to be in school. They need to. So what I'm hoping to do is to work with the therapist and with the actual school to get him back in from, for a few more days, but actually with the added support so that he's able to stay in school and to get the education that, he needs, and to, with the right support, he can do that. It does mean that there's going to be a catch up, because he's missed so much as well. Because all they've been doing up to now is managing him rather than him learning anything.
Right.
Yeah. You used the word earlier. It's like a holding place.
Yeah.
It's a pipeline to prison, in my
opinion. Oh yeah.
That
part. Don't get me started on the school prison pipeline. Like, what on earth? How is that? It's supposed to be a place of education and learning.
Absolutely.
It's not a place where you go learn how to, it's on track to prison.
Yeah.
There's a massive problem with the system. And, people like yourself that have to be battling it for so long with your children and now your grandchild. It's amazing to me. And that's why we have to keep talking about it. We have to keep talking about it, because there are other people at the front end of this, managing this, who is struggling and don't know what to do. When I did the first session that I did this morning, talking about children and mental health and how the numbers are going up, and I know, and I encourage people not to give up, to keep knocking on doors, pushing them down, do whatever you need to do. But I also know that can be tiring. That can be tiring. I was supporting someone here for about 4 months, and see how exhausting it can be when you want an assessment, when you want your medication reviewed, when you want to change, when it's like you have access once a week in this window, and if you miss the window, you have to wait next week for the next window. And it's support to be able to do that makes you be able to stay the course.
Absolutely.
If you're not supporting somebody with mental health and you know anybody in your community, please offer support. Please. As I was listening, I'm thinking, how can I support you and those women that you talk about that want to come together to have a space to talk about the trauma, to talk about what it's like? Because if you don't get help, then you're not going to be able to help as effectively as you want, because you're going to get tired. You're going to get tired. You're going to burn out.
Yeah.
And it's good to have people that you support.
Absolutely. Actually, interestingly enough, a friend of mine, we kind of got together a little, and we set up something called Self-Care Saturday.
Okay.
So every 3 months we'll put on a sort of big event, where we put speakers in to talk about. Well, you know, we've just had the first one. It's very, very new, and then in the interim, so we're not leaving big gaps until the next event. There's just a space where, you know, women can just get together and talk and just know that they're not on their own. So that's very new. That is something. But I think it's we would welcome support from yourself. But it's very, very, very much needed. What I found just even doing the very first event was how hungry, particularly women, are for the support and for change.
Yeah.
And just that community, so that they know that they're not on their own. And so there is something around self-care, even for myself. You know, it's easy for people to say, "Oh, you need a break," and all of this, but how practical is that? Times, I've got to plan everything. I can't just say, "Well, I'm just going away for the weekend."
No.
And so there are times when you feel stuck. So just having someone to kind of just chat to about it is can be healing as well. Part of that healing process, you know, just puts that little bit of balm on things.
Yeah. A space that is yours to go in.
Yeah.
Once in a while. Well, let me know. We can talk after.
Yeah, absolutely.
As I listen, I know that when you're supporting someone, it's not the easiest journey. It can be wearing, and it can wear you out. And I know sometimes carers get ill. Carers get ill. So, and if you're not attached to the system, and it's that wraparound care again, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where are the organizations that, and so many disappeared after COVID.
Yeah.
Funding affected a lot of places when it was there, and so now we have even less than we had before.
And the need is even greater, isn't it?
And the need is greater.
Yeah.
Mad, isn't it?
Yeah.
We see that with so many different types of services. Sexual trauma, abuse, just like it's less and less and less, and the need is growing.
Absolutely. I don't know what the answers would be, but I just know that it's the support that we can actually, you know, gain for ourselves, because we're not getting it from anywhere else. And it's actually dealing with the isolation, breaking down those barriers, you know, where people feel, I want to use the word shame.
There's
something around that, and guilt, because I felt that, thinking, is it something that I did?
So natural from other stuff that I do wrong.
Yeah. Did I miss something right at the beginning? Because I know for myself, for my son, I didn't realize, even though I'm, you know, a health professional myself, I didn't see the signs. And I know he had trauma prior to that when he was at school. So, you know, and I had to deregister him then. I didn't. And for me, my attitude was, okay, we draw a line under that. Let's move on. But what I didn't do was get him the emotional support that he needed at that time. But I didn't know.
But you know, Marcia, you and I like to say this, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And hindsight is 2020. There's always going to look back and go, gosh, if I knew that, then I could have made these decisions and I would have done this differently and that.
Yeah.
And you didn't know. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
That's it. And I hope that you can release yourself and not, because grief, there's grief and there's guilt that will tie you up in knots.
Yeah.
It can be debilitating. And I hope that you can release yourself from that guilt when you look back 15, 18 years and go, God, yes, it was there and there and there. But if you consider how much you know now versus how much you knew then.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is why I can help, I can see, the warning signs for my grandson and intervene before it gets to get things in place. But and you're absolutely right. I think it is about releasing myself, that we do need to release ourselves from that. And you're absolutely right. You use the word grief, and grief. But it is about just, allowing ourselves to move through that grieving process and come out the other side and just know that we can still support, but life is just different, and accepting that, it is what it is for now. And remain in this present moment and do what we can do now, and not kind of go back and think, and I have to catch myself.
when you're tempted to go back there. You can't go back and change anything. And
absolutely.
And the grief is so necessary and important to acknowledge. It's almost like a marker. The expectations, the hope, the dreams that were lost.
Absolutely.
Or have to be changed. And what it might look like now. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think, there's hope. There is hope. I mean, in spite of all that I have said, one of the things that has kept me going is my faith.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that I've held on to. I remember when this first happened, and we're talking like 2005.
Yeah.
And I remember praying, and I remember, and I can't quite remember where it is, but I remember the promise where it says, "My sons are taught of the Lord, and their well-being shall be great.
And great shall be the health, something of thy children." Is it Isaiah? I don't know. I don't remember what I meant.
I think it might be Isaiah. Yeah, and that is ingrained in my heart, and it's that has kept me going all this time.
Held on to it.
I've held on to that, and for me, that's like my covenant with God. That is my agreement with God. That is His promise to me. And one of the things that I honestly believe, that my son hasn't really had another section. He hasn't. Yes, he is tormented at times. You can see that, but I also see improvement. And I think sometimes it's not, how I would want it to be. I'd want it to be instant, but it's a process. I remember having a conversation with him recently, and I remember the belly laughs that we had recently. And then I said, when I put the phone down, and I was like, wow, I was reflecting on that conversation and thinking, this is a long time since I've been able to really belly laugh with him, and it's a process. And I know that healing will manifest completely for him. So, and I just wanted to share.
It's also when you were sharing earlier, it's the level of resilience that I hear.
Yeah.
Because I know living with mental health and not on medication and trying natural lifestyle, it's not the easiest path.
Absolutely.
And resilience was a word that came to mind when you were talking. I'm thinking, well, it has inner strength, resilience, lots of courage to be able to do that. So that's one thing to look out for every day, Marcia. For you and for him, like the resilience. Where is it? Where can I spot it?
Yeah.
Sometimes we miss those markers of resilience. Like, oh yeah, there it is, practicing that. He's strong in this area. I'm strong in this area. there must be a lot of resilience there, a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I have so much admiration for him, to have managed himself, because it must be at least 10 years since he's not had the medication. So, and he has managed, like I said, there are times when he's had the blip, but,
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, call those out. I bet there'll be lots of it.
Yeah.
There'll be lots of it. The verse that you mentioned that you lean, because you said you lean hard on your faith, and I can completely understand that, because in times like this, when no other support is available, and you know that you have God as a support, Isaiah 54 verse 13, all your children will be taught by the Lord, and great will be their peace.
Amen. Yeah.
And I like King James version, that I would say is, all thy children shall be taught of the Lord, and great shall be the peace of thy children.
Indeed.
It's a statement, isn't it? It's just like it's a promise in a statement, and you said you've held that, you've held on to that.
Yeah.
Keep holding on to it.
Yeah, absolutely. That it really has kept me. I have really when everything just seems so dark, when everything just seems so impossible, that is just embedded here in my heart, and I hang on to that and give thanks, for him.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm really grateful. I always love having conversations with you. We have so many things that are close to our hearts together. But if there's anything I can do to support the mothers who want to come together to facilitate anything, it will be virtual because of where I am. But I'm happy to hold space with you guys. I'm a mom, and while I've never had to deal with anything like that, on the acute end, there is always that. And I always say I don't want to tell my children stories. I'll let them tell it themselves. But having to, when you do what I do, you just think, oh, where did I fail? That's the first thing. It's like, I failed. Where did I fail? And you didn't fail. There's nothing that you could do about this. There's nothing that you have done wrong. There's nothing that you're doing wrong. You didn't do anything. It's just life. We live in a sinful world, and it impacts us in various ways. So you take a deep breath, but you're right. It's a lonely place, because who do you tell? There's no room for the conversation to go, guess what?
Yeah.
This is it. There's no room, because everybody's fine. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
So you're the only one. Like, everybody else is good. You're the only one. So who do you talk to when you don't feel like, I'm not coping with what's happening right now? I am totally devastated. I don't know how to say it. And, I have an amazing prayer partner that we pray 3 times a week, but we do therapy before. So she's a therapist. She works with trauma as well. And so we kind of, that's an amazing support for me, that we talk and share things before we pray. So I understand the need for having support.
Absolutely.
Let me know how, if there's anything I can do. As you were hearing me tell the speaker before, that I'm starting a group on Friday for bereavement. My husband lost his mom. My very dear friend, like a sister, lost several losses in a short period of time. And I see the grief playing out, and I'm like, what can I do? I'm not gonna call it fix. I'm a problem solver. That I like to provide solutions if I can. If I can provide solutions, I'll provide solutions. Or direct to solutions, but I can't see it and not do anything. So I see this grief, living some of the grief, thinking, I know groups provide amazing support, because we help each other heal in groups. Maybe I should do one. It was supposed to be only for people in Wales, because I'm like, we could go walking together, but now it's going to be international. So, but I'm always open for what God does and how He leads. And what He might do with that space. So We start on Friday evening, 7:30. People. I said it's 4 weeks, and one of the persons that are coming, I'm like, okay, so it's gonna be more 24 weeks than 4 because
Yeah.
I will start it and not carry it through.
Yes.
When people leave a space, they will leave with tools to go live. Grief is not something you get on from. You move, you get over. It's not that kind of thing, but you learn to live a little bit with some tools.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we start on Friday, and I'm looking forward to what God will do through the space. And I feel humble. So if I can provide a space via Wounds Discard at any time, just to hear, to listen, to help, then I'm happy to do that, Marcia. I don't think any mother should do this alone.
Yeah.
Should feel lonely or not feel like I have a space, I have a place.
Yeah.
And I'm not okay Wednesday, but you see Friday I can just go lay it down. Go lay it down on Friday. So let's do that. Thank you so much I know that this will bless people who are right there, who don't know, who can't speak. There's so much shame. Even around neurodiverse, our children being neurodiverse, the people who have shame around that because we assume everybody must be the same, and because it's not, then there's a challenge, like because we assume normal look a certain way.
Absolutely, and just knowing that, I've come to realize it's just different. They're just processing things in a different way. That's different.
Process completely different. But I mean, I think school is designed to just do one thing.
Absolutely.
Anything outside of that is not.
This one size, this one. It's dated. It doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work. As you know, we homeschool. The twins are doing exams. Well, one is doing exams, and people say, "Oh, so what's the other one doing?" I'm like, you know what? We're using gifts and talents. We're looking and watching. We're growing those talents. We're growing those gifts. We're fostering creativity. Because if everybody was the same in this world, it just wouldn't work, would it? So
Absolutely.
God has blessed us with many gifts and talents, and what we're doing is fostering those.
Absolutely.
Maximizing them, and they're shining in their capacity. That's what we're doing. I mean, GCSEs don't have any exams for that, but
I will need to have a conversation with you actually about
we homeschooled 16 years. I felt like I'm graduating when I took them to their exams the other day. Like, I feel it's a graduation for me as a mom, and I wouldn't have done it any differently.
That's fantastic. Oh,
it wasn't
easy so much.
But it's been worth it. We were reflecting on it last night, my husband and I. Thought, gosh, those 16 years have been hard. But because of the sacrifices. But would I do it again? Absolutely. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Indeed. Absolutely.
No way. Yeah. Well, thank you, Marcia, and thank you for those who have stayed with us. So what time is it? It's nearly 12 o'clock. We're going to have a short break for about half an hour, and then I'm going to come back on, and I'm going to be here on my own. I'm talking about books again. And then I have Dr. Benjamin that is coming on. He's just finished his book, and it's an amazing story. I'm looking forward to sharing it with you guys so you can read it. Then we're going to have a speaker that's coming. We're talking about postnatal care, because mental health happens sometimes in that period for women, and we don't address it. And we're talking about mental health after surviving an abusive relationship, Marcia, because you work with women who experience abuse. Marcia works with women who experience abuse. Where can people follow you, Marcia, before I talk about the lineup again?
Right. So you can follow me on LinkedIn. That's actually, so it's LinkedIn, marcia.hilton.5. So you can follow me on there. I do have a website, which is lifeinspiredwellness.com. So you can reach me there as well. And if you want to email for some more info, you can email me at info@lifeinspiredwellnesslimited.com.
Thank you, Marcia. So when I cut up the videos, then I'll put your details below. When I do that, when I edit the things. Thanks for that. So go and follow Marcia. Her feed on LinkedIn is always so encouraging, assuring, educational, and inspirational. That's what I get over there. So follow her. So after Joyce, I'm talking to Alison. Alison is a couples therapist, and we're going to talk about everything therapy. Why do people wait 7 years before they go to therapy? You know, most marriages do 7 years before. 7 years too late before they go. And then I'm closing out the day with Dr. Amanda Chisholm, and we're talking about stress. This mental health awareness. The last day of Mental Health Awareness Month at Wounds to Scars will be live all day on YouTube, except for those times when I have breaks. I'm going to go have a short half-an-hour break now, and I'll be back talking about, if you have any questions, there's a private chat option on YouTube that you can send me a message at, or you can email me the question at joanna@woundstoscars.com. If you're watching and you have my mobile number, you can send me a message, and I'll be happy to address that here without, of course, disclosing any information, right? But thank you so much for joining us, and I'll see you in half an hour.